Good evening. We begin tonight with a remark from President Donald Trump that has sent shockwaves through the foreign policy establishment and upended expectations once again. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office on Thursday, the president declared that he would be, in his own words, honored to meet with Iran's Supreme Leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, in the event that a peace deal is successfully negotiated between the two nations. The statement, delivered in the president's characteristic off-the-cuff style, has ignited a fierce debate about the boundaries of diplomacy, the personal toll of war, and whether such a meeting is even remotely conceivable given the current circumstances. President Trump made the comment while taking questions from the press. "If we make a deal, it's possible that I would meet him," the president stated from the Oval Office. The words were simple and direct, yet their implications are vast and deeply controversial. The idea of a face-to-face meeting between President Trump and Mojtaba Khamenei anytime in the near future borders on the inconceivable for a multitude of reasons. This is not only because of the enormous death, the widespread destruction, and the deep and abiding bitterness caused by the war that the United States and Israel launched against Iran on February 28th. It is also, and perhaps most painfully, because of the specific and devastating toll that the conflict has exacted upon Khamenei's own family. The current supreme leader ascended to his position under the most tragic of circumstances. His father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, was killed in an Israeli airstrike on the very first day of the war. The strike that killed the elder Khamenei did not stop there. Mojtaba Khamenei's wife and one of his children were also reported to have been killed in that same attack. The personal loss suffered by the man who now leads Iran is almost beyond comprehension, and it forms the unavoidable backdrop against which any talk of a diplomatic meeting must be measured. The question was put to President Trump directly by Peter Doocy of Fox News. Doocy asked whether this history might mean that Khamenei harbors what he termed hard feelings and simply would not want to meet with the American president. President Trump's response was characteristically frank. He replied, "Well, I would say I'm not his favorite person." The president then added a note that surprised many observers, saying of Khamenei, "But, with that being said, he's probably a professional." In some circles, he has a very good reputation, actually. The shockwaves from the president's comments were immediate and rippled rapidly across the foreign policy community. Joel Rubin, who served as a Deputy Assistant Secretary of State during the administration of former President Barack Obama, offered a blunt reaction to the president's remarks. "I saw that comment and my first thought was, my God, does he know what they think of him?" Rubin said. The former official's words capture a widespread sentiment among seasoned diplomats who view the notion of such a meeting as deeply disconnected from the painful realities on the ground. Yet, while the idea of a meeting between the American president and the Iranian supreme leader may seem shocking and even baffling to critics, it is entirely consistent with a pattern that President Trump has established throughout his political career. There are multiple instances where he has proven willing to sit down directly with enemies or adversaries that prior presidents would have avoided entirely, or at the very least would have treated with extreme wariness and caution. The most prominent and historically significant example of this tendency came during President Trump's first term in office and involved North Korea, having once publicly disparaged North Korean leader Kim Jong with the mocking nickname Little Rocket Man, and having threatened his nation with what he called fire and fury. President Trump later reversed course dramatically. He became the first sitting American president in history to meet with any North Korean leader. He went on to meet Kim Jong-un a total of 3 times. At the third of those meetings, which was held at the demilitarized zone that separates North Korea and South Korea, President Trump marked yet another unprecedented presidential milestone when he stepped across the border and set foot on the northern side, becoming the first American president to do so. Welcome back. Before the break, we detailed President Trump's stunning Oval Office declaration that he would be honored to meet with Iran's supreme leader, the deeply personal tragedy that has befallen Mojtaba Khamenei's family, and the precedent set by the president's unprecedented meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un during his first term. We now examine the broader diplomatic context and the profound challenges that stand between the present moment and any potential handshake between these two leaders. The president's willingness to meet with Khamenei must be understood within the framework of his broader approach to foreign policy, an approach that has consistently rejected the conventions and caution of the traditional diplomatic establishment. Throughout his political career, President Trump has positioned himself as a deal-maker who is unafraid to engage directly with leaders that others consider beyond the pale of acceptable diplomacy. The North Korea example remains the defining illustration. The transformation from trading insults and nuclear threats to sitting face-to-face and ultimately stepping across the world's most heavily fortified border demonstrated a flexibility and a willingness to defy expectations that no other American president has matched. Supporters of the president would argue that this history validates his approach and suggests that no diplomatic door is permanently closed. Critics, however, would counter that the North Korea meetings produced no lasting agreement on denuclearization and served primarily as a platform for the North Korean leader without delivering concrete results. The personal dimension of the Iran situation, however, introduces an element that was not present in the North Korea case. When President Trump met Kim Jong-un, there was no history of American military action having killed members of the North Korean leader's immediate family in the preceding months. The war that the United States and Israel launched on February 28th has produced a level of personal grief for Mojtaba Khamenei that makes the prospect of a cordial meeting extraordinarily difficult to imagine. The loss of a father, a spouse, and a child in a single day of military action represents a trauma that transcends the usual calculations of statecraft and diplomacy. Any meeting between President Trump and Khamenei would therefore take place under a shadow unlike anything seen in modern diplomatic history. The reaction from Joel Rubin, the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State, encapsulated the skepticism that many seasoned diplomats feel. His immediate response upon hearing the president's comments, the thought that the president might not fully grasp the depth of feeling directed toward him from Tehran, reflects a concern that the administration may be underestimating the emotional and political obstacles to such an encounter. Yet the president's own response to Peter Doocy's question about potential hard feelings suggests a degree of awareness. His acknowledgement that he is not his favorite person indicates that he understands the animosity, even as he expresses a willingness to move past it. To conclude, President Trump's offer to meet with Mojtaba Khamenei represents a dramatic and characteristically unconventional diplomatic gambit. It is a proposal that simultaneously shocks the foreign policy establishment and aligns perfectly with the president's long-established pattern of direct engagement with adversaries. Whether such a meeting ever takes place remains deeply uncertain, contingent first on the successful negotiation of a peace deal that has so far proven elusive. The human cost of the war, measured in thousands of lives and in the personal tragedy suffered by the supreme leader himself, stands as a formidable barrier to the kind of personal diplomacy the president has proposed. The coming weeks will reveal whether these words from the Oval Office mark the beginning of a new diplomatic chapter or simply another moment of controversy in a conflict that has already produced so many. That is the latest on this developing story. That concludes our in-depth coverage of President Donald Trump's stunning Oval Office remarks and the fierce reaction they have generated. To briefly summarize the key points we have brought you this evening, President Trump declared that he would be honored to meet with Iran's supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, if a peace deal is successfully negotiated between the two nations. The statement is deeply controversial given the personal toll the war has exacted upon Khamenei, who lost his father, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, his wife, and a child in an Israeli airstrike on the very first day of the conflict. When pressed by Fox News correspondent Peter Doocy about whether Khamenei might harbor hard feelings, the president acknowledged he is not his favorite person but described the Iranian leader as a professional with a good reputation in certain circles. Former Obama administration official Joel Rubin expressed shock at the comments, questioning whether the president fully grasps how he is viewed in Tehran. This diplomatic overture is consistent with President Trump's history of engaging directly with adversaries, most notably his unprecedented 3 meetings with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. We will remain on top of this developing story and bring you any further reactions as they emerge. From all of us here in the newsroom, good evening.